Hey guys, this is Merlini of MerliniDota, and I'm here to present you Merlini's Mailbag episode 23. The topic of this one is camera control and mouse settings, and this is something that newer players especially have a problem with. And this week's question was from Joe. Hi Merlini, I've been playing Dota 2 for about 2 months now, mostly bot games, and while things like item choices and ward placements are showing small incremental improvements, my mouse movements and positioning still trip me up far too often. After watching some of your replay videos, I'm in awe at how you move your camera so quickly and effectively. I've also watched your first tutorial video on Dota settings and found it quite helpful in many different areas, but alas, my camera/mouse issues still persist. Currently, I control the camera with the middle mouse button, which many times feels a bit cumbersome. I've enabled edge panning and have played around with the camera acceleration and speed sliders. Despite these adjustments, my mouse seems like it's either too sluggish to move out to pan, or if I change the DPI on the mouse, my two choices are 800 and 1600, it feels too fast and my clicking and panning become too inaccurate. This leads to issues with last hitting /9, along with me moving too close to enemies, which along with my poor camera placement gets my hero killed. Anyways, thank you for your time, and I hope you continue to make helpful videos that aid new players like myself. I actually cut out some of the question because it wouldn't fit on the page, but this one is just mainly on camera control and how to effectively move the camera about, and it's something that a lot of players take for granted, especially if you watch me play. I've just been playing RTSs as well as Dota for an extremely long time, probably like 8 or 9 years now, so I just assume that other people know how to control the camera, but it just takes a lot of practice. And most of the camera control methods are listed here. You can either have edge panning, which is moving your cursor to the edge of the screen, and then your camera will shift to the right if you have it near the right edge. You can use middle mouse scroll, which means you hold down the mouse wheel and then you scroll about to look. And you can also use keyboard arrow scroll, which you definitely should not use. If you use keyboard arrow scroll, that means you have to use your left hand, take it off the home row, and move it to the arrow keys, which means that you can't actually do anything. Like if you're scrolling, you can't react to anything, and you have to like keep moving your hand. I definitely do not advocate keyboard arrow. That's definitely the worst of the three. So edge panning, I will just join a game real fast, is what most professional players use as well as what I use. It allows you to cover large distances very quickly. One of the downsides about middle mouse scrolling is that you can only actually move one screen at a time, and usually it's going to be a little bit less. But on top of that, your camera isn't exactly where you want it to be. So edge panning is just like this. Okay, I want to look at the big neutrals, the medium neutrals, the small neutrals, and it's very easy. I also don't have to click. I like to minimize keystrokes if possible. So if you want to middle mouse scroll, you just click over here, you hold your middle mouse down, and then you can like drag the camera around. I know that some people do use this, and actually when I visited Valve, a lot of the developers actually use the middle mouse scroll, and there are some benefits to it. For example, when you want to move a very small distance, using edge panning, you have to move your mouse all the way over, and then you have to move your mouse back to where you want to click. But for edge panning, you can just go like boop, and then you don't have to move your mouse much at all. So I think that edge panning is superior for covering larger distances and for large precise movements, but for very small movements, I think that edge panning or middle mouse scrolling does win out. I actually haven't gotten too used to middle mouse scrolling, but again, you can only move like one screen at a time, whereas I can just scroll as far as I want with the edge panning. So it's what most players grow up with. I'm just very familiar with it, so I don't actually know if it's better than that, but I can list some of the pros and cons, and you can make a decision for yourself whether you like edge panning or middle mouse scrolling. Also, one of the key things is I don't want to have to constantly press my middle mouse every time I want to scroll. I already click enough as is. If any of you guys listen to my stream, you can constantly hear mouse clicking, so I don't need any more mouse clicks. As far as mouse acceleration goes, I actually heavily dislike mouse acceleration, and I have it at 0 set in my razor thingy for my Death Adder, and it's actually set all the way in game, all the way up in game, but for some reason all the way up in game means absolutely 0 acceleration. If I just move the camera, it moves at a constant speed throughout, no matter how fast I move my mouse and how far I want to move the camera. It's the same at all distances. So if you dislike that feature, then you can move your camera acceleration all the way up to actually disable it. For this enhanced pointer precision thing, I always notice when it's on. I don't exactly know what it does, but the mouse control always feels like very awkward. And take one from Team Liquid, their StarCraft 2 for mouse settings. While for some games, such as Quake, certain players prefer to have acceleration enabled. For RTS games, it is generally recommended that mouse acceleration be turned off. Why is that? Having the mouse cursor always respond in the same way for the same mouse input is generally accepted build and further develop muscle memory, though personal preference may still dictate enabling mouse acceleration. So if you're like really used to it and you can't live without it, then sure, you can use mouse acceleration, but I actually recommend against having it. It does make it much easier to make small or large precise movements because you know exactly how far your mouse is going to move, and it's not going to depend on the acceleration, and it's much easier for camera control like that. The next topic is mouse sensitivity. So I have 1800 DPI on my mouse. Camera speed sensitivity, this is subject to whatever you would like. I generally don't like to, I like to move like very quickly so I can get back to the action, click on heroes, cast my spells or whatever, and the less time I spend moving my camera, the faster I can do other things. So I generally use this guideline, like for example, when I go to the BTS studio and someone messes around with the camera settings, I use this guideline like a little bit to the left, like the left part of the O on. It's a pretty fast setting. If you aren't used to it, it's gonna feel very awkward and jerky. But I would generally recommend having a little bit higher than like the leftmost. I think default's like somewhere like over here. But the mouse, that's way too slow for me. I want to be able to look around the fight very fast, look around the map, and get as much information as possible. Basically, a higher DPI, dots per inch, is going to give you faster cursor speed without sacrificing any precision. You move your mouse an inch and it'll move that many dots on the screen. Most gamers tend to prefer lower DPI for first-person shooter games and higher DPI for RTS/MOBA games, Dota being a MOBA, though this is subject to personal preference. Again, all this is subject to personal preference. I'm just telling you what I use, what I've been used to, and what I think the pros and cons are of the way I use the mouse. And last but not least, camera positioning. Your camera should give you the most information possible. Make sure your hero isn't always at the center of your view. And directed camera isn't always the best for this reason. And directed camera just like centers on a hero that it's 2 minutes delayed, so I believe the algorithm's like, okay, this took a lot of damage or got a kill, so we'll focus the camera centered around that hero, and we'll get the information that way. So I'll wait for the directed camera to pick up something, so it notices that Dendi is on somebody. But one thing I don't like about it, I can't actually pause it right now, that if he chooses to jump someone that's like a screen away because he has his position like I do, like if he sees someone over here and he jumps, you can't actually see who he's jumping on with a directed camera. You can't see mag like blink RP, you can't see his positioning, and that's especially important when you're playing a blink hero. For example, if they're pushing this mid tower and you're like over here blinked, you want to see the enemy positioning. Especially if you're like an Enigma who can get your ultimate cancel, you want to see if there's like a disabler sitting back here, and that's like almost over one screen away. If your camera is centered around your hero, you can like barely see the enemy heroes, let alone the heroes that are going to disable you from outside of range. So I think it's very important to make sure that you have accurate camera control. And even in mid lane, when I'm harassing, I generally like have the river like in the middle, and then I can see them on the bottom left, and I can see my own hero on the top right if I'm dire, and I can harass, because I always want to be aware of where my enemy positioning is. If I'm Magnus, I want to be able to shockwave. If I'm a range hero, I want to be able to right click him or evade right clicks if he tries to play aggressive and come down the hill. So there are many pros to not having the camera right on your hero, and I don't like directed camera for this reason. I wish that it were a little bit better and it could judge the action. Like for example, 5 heroes are on the left side, 5 heroes on the right side. If you have a camera on the center of the left side, you aren't going to see any of the other heroes. And if you have the camera on the right side, you won't see any of the left heroes. And the ideal position would be, okay, left team's on the left, right team's on the right, but for some reason the algorithm doesn't make it work like that. So just work on camera positioning. It's definitely something that you should work on over time, and it should get better over time. This is also completely different from spectating games. If you're spectating games, or if you're a caster, you should have like smooth scrolling on. You should definitely use middle scroll so it's easier for people to watch. But if you're trying to play and be as efficient as possible with quick small, precise movements and being able to get as much information as possible, you should have little mouse acceleration. You should not use the middle mouse pan in general. I think, although I can see some of the pros, and you want to have your sensitivity set rather high. It may seem jerky, but you should get used to it. So thank you, Joe, for the question. If you like my videos, you can subscribe to me at youtube.com/MerliniDota. I didn't get too many questions this week, but I would appreciate if people sent me more topics to talk about, and that is at mailbag@MerliniDota.com. The show airs every Tuesday, 5:30 p.m. Pacific time on my YouTube channel /MerliniDota. Thanks, guys, for watching. I'll see you on next week's episode.